Well, I would just like to welcome everybody and thank you for such a wonderful, wonderful turnout. I'm sure, well, I definitely, and Aiden also recognize many of you. And so I would just like to welcome Aiden, who is, let me see, I think right now it's about time for you to get up, isn't it? It's 5:39 in the morning by Aiden's time. So at any rate, welcome all of you. Aiden can perhaps tell a little bit more about himself. He was our tour guide for our early Christian world pilgrimage in Turkey last May, and he is going to be the tour guide again in April. And he said that he was visiting the United States and he really wanted to come and visit us. And I believe he has been a very professional at what he does for 40 years now, isn't it? Coming on 40 years. So I think he started in his profession right around the same time I was ordained. So I was ordained in 1968. So 67. All right. So without further ado, I'd just like to ask you to welcome Aiden. He said he was a little bit challenged by the talk that I asked him to give. The reason being, he talked so very well off the top of his head with the various tour groups, and he certainly did with us, so I thought he would have no problem whatsoever in talking about just from his heart what a Muslim would like Christians to know about Islam. But he was taking it very, very seriously, so he was spending the whole day today doing his research and making notes and writing it out. So now I need to simply turn it over to Aiden. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to be in Claremont, first time in my life, even though it was about 42 years ago when I first came to the United States. I was an exchange student in Tennessee from the American Field Service program, where I spent a year with my American family and went to a Baptist church every Sunday, where I learned my first lessons of Christianity. I was 17 years old at that time and became a guide when I was 20. So it's coming to be the 40th year by the time they're back in Turkey for the next round of their pilgrimage. As I said, I'm honored to be in your town. Some of you I have met, of course, during the last pilgrimage tour, and we had a great time. So tonight, why it was difficult for me is because this question was never asked in all the years. And Father Tom, I'm sure you all know him very well, is a very challenging person. And he's a very hard-working person, very meticulous the way he works. And so on the way, coming over on the flight, I took all my notes and I finished them this afternoon. So I will have to look at them as I go along because there will be several subjects regarding that issue I will cover. And it'll be my own personal interpretation, definitely, about what would a Muslim want Christians to understand about Islam. What I learned from my teacher of theology, with whom I made my first pilgrimage to Mecca in the year 2000, was that he is a professor of tafsir, as the Arabs call it, which is the interpretation of the Quran. And he says everyone is only bound by their own interpretations. And so this will be my interpretation of how I would look at this situation. I'm definitely a facilitator between groups, and as being a pilgrim myself, after I became a pilgrim, I started looking at these tours a little differently. Then I realized what the people really wanted and needed, and what they should be looking for when they came to my country. Because Turkey, as you know, is where the east meets the west. And this is the Bosphorus that links the Sea of Marmara to the Black Sea. And then we have the Dardanelles leading you to the Aegean, and then down to the Mediterranean seas. So it's covered with seas on three sides and mountains, where Mount Ararat is on the eastern part. And all the 7 churches of Revelation that you always read about is in this part of my country. Paul, of course, is from Tarsus, where he was born and lived. In Antioch on Orontes, of course, people were called Christians according to the Bible for the first time, in the grotto of Peter. And Abraham was born and lived in Haran, which is Urfa, Edessa in the Old Testament, of course. So all this country, which is very much of a fertile land, first for Judaism, and then for Christian world, and then for the Muslim world, is where I come from. And I will also tell you a little bit about the pilgrimage, which is going on right now in Mecca and Medina. And of course, Pope Benedict XVI's visit to Turkey was only last week, which of course was a visit that was in the world agenda on most of the media. They covered it. And it's interesting, whenever I come to the United States, something like this happens in my country. That 42 years ago, I remember when I first went to Tennessee, they had newspaper people waiting for me, and I was only 17. They were asking me about the Cyprus dispute, because that's when it was taking place, and it's not over yet. So it's like the days of our lives. Some of these stories keep coming back and continuing. So I have some newspaper clippings in Turkish regarding the Pope's visit. And I will discuss with you some of the regional geopolitics of the 20th and the 21st centuries, historically as well as geopolitically. And how all this massacre, the way I see it, started in between religions as well as within religions. I will discuss that with you as well, because we're all children of Adam, and the only enemy, if so to speak we should say, is the same old devil. So why is it like this in the world we live in? There's so much dispute over religion is something I would like to go over with you. And what Islam stands for and what tolerance it represents, I will discuss with you. And in fact, I would like to start with that, but I should also tell you that today I'm proud to have my niece here from this beautiful Paradise Cove where she goes to school in Malibu. Akudai Biricik is with us. My brother Yalchin is with us. They decided to back me up on the stage here, so I'm really honored. Ladies and gentlemen, the word Islam, by the way, stands for peace and also stands for tolerance. It comes from the Arabic word of salam. People say salamun alaikum when they greet each other, meaning go with the peace of God. And peace, as is the word in all these three religions, is definitely the basic common denominator for all these religions. I will also tell you shortly about the model of the Arab states when they set up in Andalusia in Spain. And also the Ottoman Turkish style I will tell you about, what it represented. So going back to the differences these religions have had in their past, we have to understand in the Muslim faith, which started about 580 years after the death of Christ, when Muhammad was revealed with the first verses of the Quran. He was 40 years old, and at that time he spent about 23 years to compile the Quran because he was illiterate. So God, in a way, educated him. Allah gave him all his Muslim education, and when he died in 632, the Quran was already completed. Unfortunately, 24 years after he died, the Muslims had their first differences within themselves. In 656, first the Battle of Siffin, followed by the camel incident, as it's known. Muslims started killing each other for their differences. Now, this didn't take long before the Christians caught up with something like this under the name of the iconoclastic period. Those of you who've been with me on the tour in St. Sophia in Istanbul will definitely remember the cross with the missing piece. And that is the reminiscence of the iconoclastic period. And they specially left it out like that so the people like us in our times would know exactly what happened during the iconoclastic period. When the Christians started killing each other for their differences between the years of 726 and 843. That's quite a long period. But this killing didn't start with the Muslims and the Christians within the same religion. It started out between the two sons of Adam. As you know, when Cain killed Abel, there was actually one religion, and Adam was the prophet of God. And one of the sons killed the other. That's why ever since that time, thou shalt not kill, basically is one of the commandments. Now that is highly accepted by the Muslims, the same thing. And it also says that if you kill someone in the Muslim faith, it's like killing the whole human race. You will be debited in that account accordingly. Because the Muslims do believe that there's an angel on the right writing the good deeds, giving you good points. The angel on the left giving you the opposite. So if your right side is better than your left side, I guess you will end up in heaven, is what it basically means. So if you save the life of one person, then it's like you have saved all the human race. So in that sense, I don't know if any one of you saw this last movie, which is called The Guardian, done by Kevin Costner, who was a Coast Guard, saving lives. Anyone seen it? It's a new movie. Thank you. Maybe I shouldn't say it because you may want to see it, but then there is this young man who's challenging this old professional because he is like legendary and he's saved so many lives. He wants to know how many people he's saved in his life so he can break the record. But the answer he gets from him at the end of the movie is 22, which seems very little for this man. And so he wants to know that he really saved 22 lives. He says, no, those are the ones I could not save. So in that sense, Kevin Costner would be the best Muslim in in paradise because he saved so many lives. This is the kind of religion we're talking about when we talk about basically tolerance. And there is no compulsion in the Muslim religion, as chapter 2, verse 256 tells us. And then we should really approach the people with good faith in God's trust and treat them equally. Is another chapter, 16, verse 125. And if it comes to the point when it becomes between religions a dispute, there the conversation comes to an end by saying, your religion is yours, mine is mine. So there's definitely no need for religious difference, like my religion is better than yours, or my team is better than yours. This definitely is not the kind of a thing the feeling between a person and God is. But throughout the years, for example, in 1492, when this Arab state came to an end in Spain, they were asked to leave Spain or they would be baptized. So as a result of that, about 70,000 Jews were baptized, and 80,000 went to Portugal, and about 50,000 of them were taken by the Sultan's ships to Istanbul, where I come from. And so basically they could live anywhere they liked in Istanbul, not like in Prague where there's a Josefov. If any one of you has been to Prague, it's a beautiful city, you should definitely see it. So basically in Istanbul we still have about 19 of these old synagogues of the 25 which are still in use. And we still have about 25,000 Jewish people living in Istanbul. And in fact, in 1944, this Turkish-loving Pope, John the 23rd, who died in 1963, it was Cardinal Paparoncalli, lived in Istanbul for 11 years, and his words, Io amo I Turchi, I love the Turks, because he lived there long enough, helped Numan Menemencoğlu, the Turkish attaché in France in 1944, when the Vichy France was sending the Jews to concentration camps in Germany. And they both saved about 15,000 lives, stating that they were Turkish Jews. In 1453, when Mehmet II conquered Constantinople, he brought Patriarch Gennadius to be in charge of the Greek Orthodox matters, elevated him to be the next patriarch. In 1461, the same Sultan Mehmet II, in fact, brought Hovakayim from Bursa to Istanbul, and made him the patriarch for the Armenian community. In 1517, Sultan Yavuz Selim, in his special ferman, as we say, the order of the Sultan, gave the Patriarch of Jerusalem the special right to exist on their own. And from the Balkans to the Caucasus and to the Middle East, no one was forced to change their religions under the Ottoman Empire. Jerusalem was under the Ottoman Empire for 400 years, Iraq for 384 years, Athens for 356 years, which in fact is a little sad in Athens because I am there often for business. And one time I was there on a Friday, tried to go to a mosque. There was nothing open in the whole of Athens. And in Istanbul we have 157 churches in operation. There are problems between Turkey and Greece, as a matter of fact, since the beginning of the century. And this is one of those, but hopefully their special training school near Istanbul on one of the Princess Islands will be opened, and there will be more religious activity on both sides. In Rhodes, where I was about a summer ago, I was on a tour of the Windstar cruises, where I also guided for about 5 weeks on board the ship. I was on a tour with this Greek lady guide when she was telling the people on the tour that the island was occupied for many years by the Knights of St. John, and then by the Turks, the Ottoman Turks, and then by the Italians. And the worst period to them was the Italian period, she said. And the best period was the Ottoman Turks. Then everyone on the bus turned around and looked at me because they knew I was on board with them. And they thought I knew the guide, so she was being nice to me. And I told them I'd never seen the lady, so I asked her the question. I said, why are you saying the best period was under the Turks? She said, at the time the Turks ruled the island for 390 years, they lived in one part of the town, and then the Greeks lived on the other part. And they had no problems, but they paid their taxes, and they went on with their lives. But when the Italians came, they interfered in church matters and in schooling matters. So the people in Rhodes for about 30 years did not send their kids to school, and they quit going to church. Which, to me, doesn't make much sense. Because Christianity is Christianity, and Muslim faith is Muslim faith. And this is all the same religion of God. But these things has happened. And since 1054, of course, the two churches have separated. And that's like 952 years these two churches have been separated. And I hope one day this picture will come true with Benedict XVI and Bartholomeus as leaders of the two churches will unite. Because God's religion is one, whether it's in the same religion or outside the religion. The word jihad, of course, is being discussed at all times, but a quick, easy description of it is taking religion as the first aim of life is the meaning of jihad. And so we have to look at the matters economically, socially, from the aspect of religion, culturally, and historically, in order to have solutions. Pope Benedict XVI, despite most people's expectations, had a wonderful visit in my country. He was met by the Prime Minister at the door of his flight, and then he went to see the Turkish President. And then I was doing a tour at the time, and of course, a day later, we visited Mother Virgin Mary's house in Ephesus. He was there. And the only bad thing that happened while he was there was the traffic was just like as we came here to Claremont. It took us an hour and 15 minutes from LAX, so basically it was worse than that. My wife told me it didn't work. They just stopped the traffic for about 4 hours. So other than that, this is in Selçuk, in Virgin Mary's house. He started in Turkish saying, "Dear brothers, may God be with you." And then he said to the mother of the Savior, "Pray for us." And he waved the Turkish people with the Turkish flag. This is what the paper is saying. And very colorful. I marked out the places that they think by waving the flag was a big gesture. The Turkish people feel this way. And he also made comments about Turkey's entry into the European Union, which was unexpected, but he even commented on that. Said that he was in favor of it. And this is showing in St. George's Church, where he held a mutual mass with Patriarch Bartholomeus, where he also kissed St. Gregory the Theologian's and St. John the Chrysostomos' holy relics, which were returned from the Vatican some 2 years ago to Constantinople. They were taken away during the conquest of Constantinople by the Fourth Crusades. So there's been great effort on the part of the two churches to come together. And it was televised live to the world. I don't know if you got to see it. He's the first pope. Not the first pope. It is his first visit to a mosque, and he visited the Blue Mosque in Istanbul, where he stood side by side facing Mecca and prayed to God next to the imam in charge of the mosque. So these definitely were good pictures, and I hope it will go beyond being good pictures. We'll go into lasting relations, because wherever I go, I carry my 2 books with me, and I keep reading, trying to learn. It's endless. And again, to have a good teacher like Father Tom is a blessing. And I shared some of his informations while we were on the tour together. And they're very important for me. Depending on where you look at these world matters, you might get a different perspective. For example, you people here listen to the local CNN. There's also the international CNN, and then there's the local Turkish CNN. They're all different, okay? So the angle changes, the perspective changes. You may not be getting so much of the publicity here. This is why I brought the papers to you if you would like to look at them later on. And in fact, it was in 1999 when I was doing a Bosphorus cruise. Father Tom is right, I speak off the top of my head. This gentleman entered into the cabin and he said, "Where are you reading it from?" While I was speaking. And I went like that and I kept on talking. Later on they introduced him to me. He was actually a congressman. And he suggested that I would speak to the senators. He said they have a lot to learn. I don't comment about that. I'm sure you know better than me regarding that subject, how that should go. But Turkey, where I come from, is really where the Bermuda Triangle is. Okay? I'm sure you've heard of that description before. And Bermuda is far away from Turkey, but the Balkans, the Caucasus, and the Middle East. You draw lines between them, and Turkey is right in the middle of it. Turkey is 99% Islamic. Turkey is a member of NATO since 1952, an ally of the US, a Western partner in defense of the world. But we have neighbors like Syria, Iraq, Iran, Armenia, Georgia, Russia, Greece, and Bulgaria. So it's a pretty hot neighborhood, so I can tell you. Right? And sometimes my American friends are complaining about their neighbors. And so I often offer them, well, you have the choice. We'll have a swap if you like. So So from the Turkish Bermuda Triangle, I want to tell you a little bit about what kind of missionary work happens in my country, being 99% Muslim. You can listen to an FM station, 103.5 in Istanbul, and they will tell you about Christianity and the work Jesus Christ had done in Turkish. They will give you books and it will say, have you read the Bible? And they will send you books and VCDs. And sometimes I hear things, I've never seen it happening in front of my eyes, but people speak about things like even money is given to people who accept the Bible. And in fact, a very unfortunate thing happened in February 2006. Father Santoro was killed in Trabzon, and the murderer was a young man, and he was sentenced this year to 16 and a half years in jail. This is the only incident in my country, other than the Greek patriarch in 1821 being hanged for treason, are the two things I can tell you in the last 500 years that happened because of religion. We have had more Turkish Muslim imams being killed in the 500 years. But this is not between religions, and you are fortunate to live in a country where you are exercising religious freedom. Not in too many parts of the world people have the same rights. But I come from this culture, and I am proud to tell you that it is as free as possible. In 1863, for example, the Roberts College School in Istanbul was founded by an American missionary. And that is a very, very strategic and very prestigious school in my city. The French have opened their high schools, Damnation, where Saint-Esprit Church is located. The Austrians, the Germans have high schools. Italian high school, where my daughter graduated from. We have Jewish, Greek, Armenian, Bulgarian, and Russian schools all throughout the country. I don't know if this kind of missionary work by the Muslims is done in North America. Are they going around trying to spread their religion? If they are, how is this received by the people here? This, of course, is something maybe we can find out more about later on. But within religion, there has been many killings. Of the four caliphs that followed the Muslim lead after Muhammad's death, 3 were assassinated. So there's always been killings within religion as well as across religions. Of course, 1989 was an interesting year when the Berlin Wall came down, and that ended the communism, but left its place to what is called the green danger, and that unfortunately reflected the Muslim faith. Of course, 9/11 had global effects, and it's basically like the effect of Pearl Harbor to the Americans, where the Japanese Americans were kept in camps for about 3.5 years. Muslims in the US were interrogated because of 9/11. Again, in the Middle East, one of the questions people usually ask about is that of the 20 assassins of 9/11, 8 were Saudi nationals. Why did the US government choose to send democracy to Iraq rather than Saudi Arabia? Is another question people ask me. Why did they choose Afghanistan and Iraq but not Saudi Arabia? the same Saudi Arabia accepted some 8,000 American soldiers in 1991, the first Gulf crisis. And that is something bin Laden definitely has used as an excuse to escalate his terrorist actions. And he said the Holy Land of the Muslims is under the occupation of the infidels. Again, a question that is asked to me by the people who come on my tours is, why are you not denouncing as the Muslim world that you are against terrorism? Well, I would like to thank Father Tone for that, because he sent me the answer I needed. Kill us too, we're also Americans. This is done by an American, one of the probably 6 to 8 million Muslim Americans living in this country. When they decided to kill Americans in Iraq, this was the answer they sent to them. The Muslims, as well as the Christians, and as well as the Jews, as well as anyone who may or may not believe in God, people are against terrorism. But I think we should all come to an understanding that terrorism does not have a religious affiliation. Terrorists are terrorists. Like thieves are thieves, okay? And they should be punished for what they're doing. We cannot elevate them to the level of freedom fighters in some countries and treat them as terrorists in other countries. And this should be done in the UN unilaterally. I think this is a very important move. As well as signing the bill for the clear air. We should look after our planet, and it should be signed as well. We should mean business when it comes to such strategic matters. We should also set up this subcommittee in the UN and find out what are these differences within or across religions that is causing the problems. And every 6 months, I think they should be promoting this plan and coming out with an advance report saying how well they have gone in time in getting rid of some of these problems. There is, for example, a True Furqan, as they call it, a new Quran that is being published, which has got nothing to do with the Quran, and they're circulating it. And I have no idea who's really doing it, but we should also come out with an anti-jihad and anti-crusade campaign and show to the world that this is not just a religious matter. Lives are at stake every day, hundreds of people are dying, and we should definitely mean more business regarding this aspect of the subject. We should also, I don't know how, but tell the media to be more tolerant towards the other side. Words like Islamophobia or Islamofascismo, I have no idea what they have to do with Islam, but it definitely has got nothing to do with the tolerance this religion offers. The Ottomans, for example, in 1299, when they formed the first principality near Söğüt, Sultan Osman appointed this judge to look after religious affairs every Friday. And on one of those decisions, he favored the Christian landowner against the Muslim who worked for him. Now this became an example, and people started moving into Karacahisar, which is where it happened. They said there is justice in that village. We want to live there. We want to make trade with the people living there. because that is what the world needs. If you don't have justice, you have nothing. And if you don't solve the problem in Palestine, that's square one, the next level will never come up. We have to get to the bottom of these problems and understand what it means. We should also read not only our books more carefully and understand our books more carefully, we should understand the other religions' books as well. As part of cultural, as part of information-wise. We don't have to go with the rules, but we should learn more about it. This is why when we did our pilgrimage tour in Pergamon, I'm sure you will remember, the throne of the Satan, which is passing in the letter, right to the angel of Pergamon. The throne of Satan represented the temple of Zeus. And when John said lukewarm to the people of Laodicea, he meant the lukewarm waters across the valley in Hierapolis. Now, these may be details, but again, to understand one's own religion and to know it properly, I think is a big plus for those people who are true believers. At the moment, we are having a dialogue of deaf people between religions. I think we should try and find a way so that the deaf people can start to hear. And we should probably not only understand the books, but we should live the way the books are telling us to live. Just to learn it as a piece of advice and not to live it, I don't think is being a true religious person. In Turkey, we're having problems. People reciting these Arabic verses of the Quran, they don't know their meanings most of the time. So it's hard for them to live it, and we're having problems like wearing a turban in a government space. Should that be allowed or not is one of the questions. And this is all in style, in form. This is not really from the heart. It's not going through the heart. All these problems we're discussing every day is really not in the essence of God. I cannot understand how people kill one another and call it a holy war, and they do it in the name of the God. What is holy about a massacre? I ask this question to myself. And why are we sending the bill to God? As long as He has not changed His commandment, thou shalt not kill, I think we should find other excuses. Now, all of these things are happening, but it also happened in between religions. As you know, the Crusades lasted for some 200 years. Of the several Crusades, the fourth one is a very interesting one, which we talked about earlier on with my group. That these were Latins, and they were led by the Doge of Venice by the name of Dandalo. And Constantinople was Greek Orthodox, and it was the Byzantine Empire. It was the Eastern Roman Empire. So why would the Western Roman Empire capture the Eastern Roman Empire in the name of the God? Well, there's a lot more to it because of Italians today. John will remember this conversation with me. I told them that today's Italians, once upon a time, they were Trojans before they were Romans. So the heritage goes back to Troy. in my country. So for all the Italians in the world, I'm telling them to come home and visit Troy. Where today we have Brad Pitt's horse from the movie, as well as the old horse in the original site. So we should learn from history, everyone, in order to have peace on earth. We should let others learn from the lessons of history. People say history keeps repeating itself. Why do you think it repeats itself? Because we are not learning. If you make the same mistake every day, it will happen again, won't it? So there is history, and we have to learn from it. And from the multicultural Ottoman Empire, 22 nations came alive. That is an example we should think about. How did they do it? And the Ottomans, of course, after 1839, they say turned their face to the West and tried to become Western. Well, for Turkey, the West is Europe, and further west is the United States or Canada, right? So, what do we understand from our relations, both with the European nations and with the US? Turkey signed this treaty to understand each other a little better, to be part of the European community in 1963. According to that, Turkey would have joined the Union by 1987. Today it's 2006. They're saying probably another 10 years. I have newspaper clippings here. They're saying it's going to be a train accident. Well, to me it's a train crash. And it happened a long time ago. Because the Europeans are not forgetting the history. They are living in the past, when the Ottomans were a major superpower. And when they, for example, tried to conquer Vienna, the Austrians will never forget that. And so we have a tough relationship going on with Europe right now. I'm sure you will hear more about it, because this very month we're having the final report to come out, and it will be an accident. They all now know this accident will take place. Well, the French and the Germans definitely are the two leaders of the European community. And if Turkey becomes a member to the European community, in 10 years there will be more Turks living than in Germany with the Germans. That means there will be more Turkish parliamentarians in Strasbourg than the German parliamentarians. The Germans will never accept that. The French farmers getting subsidy from the European Union. In the whole of European community, out of 475 million people, they have 30 million farmers. Turkey, which is 73 million, we have also 30 million farmers. So that means the subsidy will have to be split into two. And the French farmers will never accept that, because if they're unhappy with something from the state, they will drive their tractors in the middle of Champs-Élysées Boulevard and stop the traffic. All right? So from that perspective, I doubt this will ever come alive. If it ever comes alive, will the European Union will be in place at that time is the next question. Turkish-American relationships go back to 1944. At the end of the Second World War, Turkey was not part of this war, and in Yalta, the famous conference between President Roosevelt, Stalin, and Prime Minister Churchill, they were dividing and deciding on the map of Europe. when Stalin wanted the base along the Bosphorus to control the passage rights with the Turkish government. Prime Minister Churchill said this will never work, the Turks will never accept it. They both asked him, well, how do you know? He had the experience of fighting against the Turks as First Lord of the Admiralty at the Gallipoli campaign in 1914. So he knew in 1915 what had happened. And some 30 years later, his experience told him what was to come of it. And so the Russians, with the backing of the US and the British, never wanted the base in 1945. But today, if I tell you the Bosphorus is the world's busiest strait, with 137 ocean-going liners every day, and some 2,000 local ships go from one continent to the other. It's the only city in the world where I come from, Istanbul. One continent, Asia, one continent, Europe. And that traffic, with all the oil ships, with all the cruise ships going right through, is definitely a place we should think about as to the strategic importance of my country. And again, in 1952, when the Turkish soldiers, on the same side with the UN forces, saved the lives of 100,000 American soldiers in the Battle of Kunuri in 1952 by defending the bridge. This is why General MacArthur gave the Turkish soldiers the best soldier medal. But at the same time, he said they were the worst drivers he had ever seen. So those of you who've been to my country, they know how we drive already. Things don't change sometimes. And yet the Turks entered NATO along with Greece in 1952. In fact, it's not the Turkish nation that entered NATO. This is sometimes understood in a different way. Because the Turkish armed forces entered NATO and they progressed. So they are a more elite group in my country as far as education is concerned. And they have interfered in civilian life in several occasions, with military junta in 1960, in 1971, in 1980. And thanks God, maybe that's all we will have in my country, and because it kind of slows down the democratic progress of the country. Of course, we have to understand today's world by probably reading Samuel Huntington's Clash of Civilizations, book he wrote in 1993, when the Twin Towers was attacked for the first time by a Muslim militant group. I shouldn't even say Muslim militant group, but that's how you hear it in the media. And so basically, recently, Kofi Annan was in Istanbul, and the Spanish Prime Minister, as well as the Turkish Prime Minister, they both are leaders of a new group representing the togetherness of civilizations rather than the clash of civilizations, representing the Muslim world and the Christian world. And Istanbul also was designated as the cultural center of Europe for 2010, the city where I come from. I'm going to tell you shortly a little bit about the tale of the two cities, which is this time Rome and Constantinople, but I will hopefully want to change my film because it's coming to an end. So I will ask you to give me 2 minutes. I shall return. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Tale of the Two Cities Rome, as the capital of the Western Roman Empire, when it split up into two in 395 AD, and Constantinople becoming capital of the Eastern Roman Empire at the same time. Today, Rome is 4 million, Istanbul is 14 million. So, there's more Turks than Italians living in these two capitals, majestic capitals. Napoleon Bonaparte in 1798 said, "Whoever is in control of the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles will have a lot to say as to what happens in the Mediterranean." And that is very, very true today. There are more Russian ships in the Mediterranean than the whole Sixth Fleet of the US put together and the NATO forces. Because it is important if, God forbid, there will be a third world war. Constantine the Great, of course, was, as the name suggests, a turning point for the Christian world. He was the leader in the Nicene Creed in 325 AD. He chose Constantinople to be the new Rome over Troy. There is historical evidence on that. And in the 16th century, Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent was, in a way, like President Bush today in the world, the Ottoman Sultan. And in 1793, when the first American fleet came to the Mediterranean for trading, today we see these worlds, these waters, to be the busiest waterway in the world, not only for all kinds of passages, but the oil coming from the Caucasus into the rest of the world is using these two straits. I had another very interesting tour this year. It was to a Protestant group, and I was told they had 57 million members in 211 countries. They asked me if they could set up a church in Turkey. I said, by all means, there is no problem as far as the law is concerned. But since Turkish Republic was founded in 1923, religion has been separated in my country from state affairs. And that is why a lot of the sect gathering places, which are called tekke in Turkish, were closed in 1925. That's why religion in Turkey is something that is left for the people, because Turkey is secular. And this is why if you go to a municipal building, you can find ladies wearing a scarf, whereas you will not be able to see that if you go to a governmental office. Turkey is a hard country to understand, everyone. And it's going to be even harder in 2007 when we will have elections for a new president in April and for a new parliament in November 2007. The world has changed a lot in the last 42 years. I have been back to the States. I was reading the numbers on the McDonald's yesterday, and I noticed 99 billion hamburgers were sold. Do you know in 1964 the number was only 2 million? So that probably explains to you a lot of things today. From Russia with Love was the movie of James Bond in 1964. Now it's Casino Royale. It's a very nice movie. Everything is very much electronically gadgeted. In the Muslim faith, giving alms is a very important deed. Sadaqah, as we call it. And sadaqah is not just money given to people, it could be a smile. Because when religion first came out, people were poor. When Muhammad told them that they had to give 2.5% of their income to the poor every year, they said, well, we don't have anything to eat tonight. How are we going to give the 2.5%? He said, well, don't you have some kind words and a nice smile? That, he said, is also almsgiving. He also said, if what you knew yesterday is as much as what you know today, that means you lost one day. And he also said, if your neighbor goes to sleep hungry, you're not one of us. But when he said one of us, he meant for any neighbor. Because in Turkey, we are used to living all these minorities and majorities together. I was raised with Jewish friends, Greek friends, Armenian friends, all along. They were our neighbors. So sharing in the Muslim faith is a very important thing. And when you are saying, as the topic of our conversation, what would a Muslim want Christians to understand about Islam? I would say, first of all, the Muslims should understand Islam. It's not just what the book says, it's how they apply it. And then I would expect the Christians to do the same in their own faith, understand and apply their own religion. And then try to understand each other and try to live in peace. It's easier, it costs less, and it's a simple solution. And hopefully we will find a radical solution someday. Certain things are coming to my mind ever since Father Tom gave me this topic to talk about. I think it's all about making a choice. Some people wait at home for destiny to come and find them. I choose the system of finding my own destiny by going out. So to me, my mentor is a master architect, Sinan, who worked till the last day of his life. He was 98 years old when he died. I'm not asking God to be so kind to me, but I'm asking Him to give me the strength. 7 a.m. in Istanbul time to stand up and keep an understandable conversation going. And have people coming from faraway distances in this traffic to listen to me. So that is my understanding. In the Blue Mosque it said, El Kasebu Habibullah, God loves those who work hard. Because you are working for God by looking after your family. And so this is what it's all about. I ask myself, how tolerant am I? How much patience do I need? How can I judge others? Who am I to do that? Prophet Muhammad had once said before he died, a black person has nothing superior over a white man, and vice versa. An Arab is not superior to a non-Arab. He said this in the 7th century AD. These became the rules which the UN accepted in 1948 under the Human Rights Act. So these have been there all along, and yet who are we to segregate? Who are we to treat the other party differently? How do we know we are right? I think we should stop playing God's role and let Him do His job, is how I feel. Right now there are some 4 million Muslims from all around the world in Mecca and Medina enjoying their pilgrimage. Well, they are equal in the sense that if they go to the mosque before the next person, they will sit in front of him. There is no reserved space. And they will throw the stone like Abraham did. Like, remember in the church of Korah when the devil approached Jesus Christ and we could see the 6 kingdoms of the world represented when he tried to change his mind. So the stoning of the devil comes from Abraham to Muhammad, and that will be one of the things they will do. They will spend one night in the Arafat desert, which is about 25 kilometers outside of Mecca, for one night in tents. And these people are there to make their pilgrimage. It is unfortunate that most of the people from my country, they try and leave that thing to the latter part of their lives, by which time they're not strong physically to be able to do it. And that is difficult because most of them are hoping to die when they reach the Holy Land and be buried there. But I would say it is better to do it when you're young, when you can do it. Because what is haram to you before you become a pilgrim is also haram to you after you have become one. So nothing changes in one's life when you become a pilgrim. You just realize more things by being there and try to live the rest of your life accordingly. Not find out at the end of your life what you should have done 40 years ago. This again is my interpretation of the faith. In the Quran it will tell you that people were not created equal. They were created with different habits, with different capacity, and some were richer than the others, so they would provide work for the others. And so they don't all go through the same examination. Some go through this life a lot harder than the others. Some are born with deficiencies, and they have to live their lives with these deficiencies. So their examination is a lot harder. I wonder what we can do more in the way of bringing a little bit more of peace to the world. I think we could start building through this dialogue between the church and the mosque and the synagogue, that we should try together to help the poor, to find the hungry, and have educational programs, have tolerance groups founded, and restore all these historically and religiously important places. Like in my country, there are several places which is important for the Christian world that needs to be restored. There are places which have never been excavated, like Kolasha, like Lystra, Derby. All these places through the Bible have yet not been excavated. And again, we should, I think, have more summer camps for the youth and try and educate them so they become more church-going and mosque-going people, rather than we drive them away from these places. I think we have a common goal in bringing the youth to the road which leads to God, rather than drive them away. I think it is left in our hands to do that. I will also tell you that we should find better ways of making these religious places to perform their duties correctly. We should look into the financing and give them more support. Because if you come together to a church and feel the same things as a congregation, and the Muslims do the same thing in a mosque, that is what a mosque is for. It's called a jami, and it comes from the word jama'at, which means congregation. Because God wanted people to come together. He could have created us all the same. We could all have the same fingerprints. But He did not, did He? There must be a reason for why He did all that. He did that. He divided us into these different groups so we would understand and enjoy each other and learn from each other's experiences. Naturally, there would be fighting as well. This is all within our nature, and we have to learn to live with that as well. At this point, I would like to say a prayer to our dear Pat Dyer's son who lost his life, and to Tom Benning Jr., my American father who died this year, and my wife Özlem's uncle who we lost this year. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Elhamdülillah. Elhamdülillahi Rabbil Alemin. Errahmanirrahim. Maliki yevmiddin. İyyâke nâbudu ve iyyâke nestaîn. İhdina sıratal müstakim. Sıratal lezîne en'amte aleyhim. Gayril mağdubi aleyhim ve'd-dâllîn. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Kul huvallahu ehad. Allahus samed. Lem yelid ve lem yulad ve lem yekun lehu kufuven ahad. May their souls rest in peace. This is what Prophet Muhammad did in Medina when a Christian group came to visit him, to find out what this new religion was all about. It was about time for their Mass. They said, we need to be excused, go find somewhere so we can do our Mass. He said, no, this mosque is a place for you to have Mass. He left the mosque for the Christian group to have Mass in the mosque. This is the kind of understanding we should have, ladies and gentlemen. And lastly, I want to tell you we're in this boat together. Whether the boat landed on Mount Ararat or Mount Judi, as the Quran says, without differences, God has created this cultural mosaic. He created us from different tribes so we could and would get to know and enjoy each other and learn from each other's experience. May God bless us all and mercy us, and hoping to see each and every one of you in heaven. Yours truly, Aydın Erol'u, December 6, 2006, to make history for the records. And Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, everyone. And thank you for having me here. Thank you very much. You have been most patient. I'm sure you have questions, so we should probably, with your permission, allocate a little bit of time for questions.
If we may, that would be wonderful. I realize that it's just about time for you to be getting up.
I'm up already. Now I'm all awake and up, waiting for questions, no problem.
So if we can, because we are recording this, I wonder if you have a question, if you could raise your hand and then say it into the microphone. Come on, you're not usually this shy.
I really have two. What is haram?
What is?
Yes, what does it mean?
Haram?
You use the term, yes.
Haram is forbidden. And this is where the word harem also comes from. there's a portion in the town of Mecca which is forbidden to the other religions. A portion where the mosque is located. If you're driving on the highway getting in that direction, you will see the last exit for non-Muslims. So entry into that section is haram, is forbidden. That means unless you show your passport stating you are a Muslim, you will be allowed into that portion. Again, this application was true in the Church of Saint Sophia. You could come into the Indo-Narthex, but you were not allowed to go into the nave at the time, because that portion was only for the Christians as well. So there is a reciprocal application to it. And also, harem is a part of the house which is haram to the others who are not part of the family. And that is how it must be understood. First question.
Thank you.
Next one was?
Thank you. If I were to attend a service at a mosque, what would happen? I know what happens when we come to Mass. And you see pictures of people on prayer rugs. What happens in your service, your Sabbath service?
If this is a man who is to make the prayer, he will go like this, turning to Mecca, submitting to Allah, leaving the world behind, this action. And the ladies will do the same action as is. And then the man will tie his hands down, the right hand on top.
May I just briefly, quickly interrupt? Mecca is that way.
So then, in that sense, everyone, when that happens, the ladies will put their hands up here. They will stand. That's one of the 5 actions. And there's bowing, kneeling, prostrating, and seated on the legs, facing Mecca. And when the prayer is finished, saluting the angels on the right, then on the left is how it must be done. And if you're not physically capable to do all that, you could use probably one of those collapsible chairs they have in the mosques, or bring your own. And if you cannot even do that, it's all in the mind. You can wink the eyelids and do it. You don't need to be in a mosque to do all this. You could do it at home, on the street, at home, during the flight, when you fly in your own seat. Any direction is Mecca if you don't know where it is. Thank you. Thank you for showing me this.
Thank you. Anyone else? Louis.
You said that Suleiman the Magnificent was akin to or like George Bush, but you didn't elaborate at all. Could you do so, please?
I meant it as a way showing the U.S. being the superpower of the 21st century. After the wall of Berlin came down, that basically is what happened. So I didn't mean in the sense of any personal togetherness, or the style of eating the yogurt, as we say in Turkish, doing business-wise, or the way they look at life. I had no idea that it would be understood that way, but basically the Ottomans were a superpower, and if the German king had a problem with the French, he would be the mediator in between the two of them. They would ask him to do the work. That's what I meant. Thank you. Yes, please.
Anyone else?
We must have more questions because we will have a quiz, as you know it. So you better ask me now.
What the history of the Turks versus the Armenian people and the massacre, could you say something about that?
Yes, I have. I will share with you here some very recent newspaper clippings that came about this. The American historian Bernard Leavis was the one who said there was no massacre. And so it made the Armenian lobby a little bit angry, is what the paper is saying. Now, 1915, the 24th to the 25th of April was the longest day in the Ottoman history. Because they were already fighting, because of the First World War, the Ottomans, in the Russian front. They lost in one winter 90,000 men. They were fighting against the British in Palestine. The Anzacs had landed in Gallipoli. And the relocation of the Armenians as a decree was issued the very same night, on the 24th, becoming into the 25th. This is why the Armenian diaspora, they celebrate that day, or they remember that day, as they say, as the day of massacre. Now, during the conditions of the war, people killed each other. But there is no order from the Ottomans which has been proven yet and accepted by the UN or any other world authority on this issue, that there was any genocide. So the word genocide is unfortunately what the Armenian diaspora want it to be accepted. Whereas the Turkish Armenians, this is what this papers that I have here say, they're happy living in Turkey because there's already an Armenia here that they could go and live to. But the Armenians living in Armenia need to be better terms with the Turks for trade to open to the rest of the world. So this situation of this Armenian dispute between Turkey and the diaspora hopefully one day will be solved. This is why the Turkish Prime Minister said, our archives are open, please open your archives, let us have an international historian group look into it, and then we're ready to go for the consequences. Because the Ottomans, they were not nice to the people because they wanted to be nice. The tolerance that I tried to explain to you was not because of the good heart of the Ottoman people. It is the rule of Islam to be kind to the others. So they were doing the word of the gods. They were not doing it from their hearts sometimes, or maybe they were doing it from their hearts, but it was the order of the God that they were following. So those people would not have massacred Armenians who were known as the close relatives of the Turks for all the years. For example, the Greeks, the Macedonians, the Romanians, the Bulgarians, they had rebelled against the Ottomans, but the Armenians had never rebelled. That's why it hurts me to hear this word, and I am looking forward one day this will be resolved, one way or the other. And if there has been injustice, we should all face it. And if it hasn't happened in that sense, then we should accept it as well. So today, it is in the hands of probably state people rather than religious people to solve this issue. So hopefully one day it will be resolved, is all I can say. At this point in time, none of these claims have been proven. Each side has their stories. And I am all for one thing. We should take lessons from the past, not forget it, but we shouldn't teach our young ones hatred. Whatever you fill into that glass is what comes out of it. If you fill it with love, love will come out. Thank you. Yes, please.
Quoted a source saying that Benedict now supports accepting Turkey into the European Union. And of course, that hasn't always been the case with him. Can you explain, or can you speculate why he has changed his mind, if indeed that has happened?
Most of the American presidents, before they become a president, they will favor the Armenian lobby in the United States. But once they become presidents, they will favor the Turks. This is something political because there is more of common interest between the United States and the Turkey than the Armenian lobby meaning to the US. So this, I will use it as an example to answer your question. Pope Benedict XVI, when he was Cardinal Ratzinger, in 2004, spoke to French media and told them that Turkey did not belong to Europe because it came from a different culture. The culture which the East represented, and the West was different than the East, is what he said. Now that upset the Turkish people, because the Turkish people probably look at religious people with their religious attire. They don't look at them like Vatican, which they should. They should understand that the people speaking for the Vatican represent both the state power as well as religious power. So I think that should be explained better by the Vatican representative in my country to the people of this land, so they would know more as to how they should react. Because they should see him representing the Vatican, so he is allowed to make stately comments as well as religious comments. But we probably see him more as a religious head than him as a state head. And this is where there's a problem, I think. It's a communication problem. This, I think, should be better. And at the same time, the Blue Mosque was his first mosque where he entered. And the last 21 months he has been Pope Benedict XVI. I'm sure he knows more the responsibilities of what it means to be Pope rather than a cardinal, which he was when he said those words. Now mind you, in September 2006, he said words that upset the Islamic world, and it had religious connotation this time. But we totally saw a different Pope in Istanbul and in Turkey and the other parts of the country. He was all for the dialogue, and that's what the world needs. So I think like we're learning something every day differently. I'm sure he's learning things differently every day as well, finding out, meeting people. And so our leaders must also learn that he stands for the two powers as well, and treat him equally. But this visit that he has done was well received, and now the people look at him almost as well as they did with Papa Roncalli, Pope Roncalli. Thank you. Next question, please.
May I just make a very brief comment on that, because I do have an opinion on that one too. I think more than anything, under Pope Benedict the 16th, we are seeing the recognition of the fallible and human side of the Pope as a human being, as a teacher, as one who recognizes, though, that, like the rest of us, he is a work in progress. And we tend to expect the Pope to be the one who says all of the right things and tell us what to do and, sort of be the big daddy. And then sometimes we'll say whether we like it or not, or whether we agree with it or not. But, I think Benedict is trying very hard on the world scene and on the interfacing with religions, both Orthodox and the Muslim religious world, is trying very hard to be a dialogue partner. And that does mean, I think, growing in understanding. I think it's very true. When he first spoke about the opposition of Turkey into the European Union, you have to pay some attention to the audience he was talking to. He was talking to the French. And you have to pay some attention to the fact that he was talking about cultural and historical differences. I think that what he showed when he went to Turkey was not so much a change. I don't think it was a turnaround, but I think it was looking at the same question from a broader perspective. Now, one Catholic commentator also pointed out that what is the Pope's personal opinion is not necessarily Vatican policy. And sometimes you do have, just as we have in other areas too, a statement being made that is interpreted as policy, and on the other hand, a statement has to come after that says, no, this is what our policy is. Vatican policy has certainly been defined that they do not have an objection to Turkey's seeking to enter the European Union. Rather carefully worded, I would say, but nonetheless, I think significant, because there was not an articulated Vatican policy on that question before, I don't believe. So, another thing that we, as long as I have the microphone, that we do need to understand, sorry, another thing that we do need to understand is that Vatican policy is not in itself church teaching, So not everything that comes out of the Vatican is official church teaching. Church teaching is a very, very small, clearly defined part of that. And much of what would be Vatican positions and Vatican policy, as well as the ordinary teaching, say, of the Pope, the magisterium, tries to apply what we would call doctrine, church teaching, to, okay, what is our situation now? And that's always going to be a work in progress.
I wanted to ask about whether or not there'll be a reversal of President Ataturk's secularization of Turkey. We seem to be hearing a lot more that there's a trend to reverse the secularization of the country.
The Turks became Muslim in 920 AD, but became democratic in 1923, almost 1,000 years ago. So this topic will always be discussed. There's another world to live for another 1,000 years. Because, as the Italians say, Roma non è fatto in un giorno. So these issues will take time. And as they will take time, there will be, like the Pope, not always saying what the Vatican policy is. The president in Turkey will say one thing and the prime minister will do the other. And this is really what democracy is all about, I guess. You have to speak out what you think. And so, but to come back to that question, I will not see a major policy change. Turkey is a secular country and will remain that way. As being a religious person myself, I'm glad to see it's different, that it's not under the same authority. Because at one time, when Mohammed was in charge of political as well as religious affairs in Medina, it was a smaller state. There were fewer issues. But today, our Prime Minister is 52 years old, had to rest for 3 days about a month ago because of the busy program he had to go through. People who are at their best ages find it difficult to cope up with that business. So I don't think it would be easier for him to have also religious affairs, as he would be the one to decide for. So from the standpoint of getting the job done, to separate the two things is always the better way of doing it. Because what is God's work is between the people and the God. So the state should not get in there, is what I think, personally. And it will not change. It will stay in the course. But this will always be questioned, and it will always be in people's minds. Will it change? Will it not change? But Turkey, let us not forget, is a unique example in the Muslim world. Not just the bridge between Europe and Asia, but also it is where the clash of civilizations can be solved. This is why if Europeans do not take Turkey in, Turkey will not lose. This is what the Prime Minister is saying now. And I have the papers, we can read it tomorrow, on Friday, and I will explain more on that meeting at that time. Thank you for asking.
Perhaps
One last question.
Would you comment on the educational system in Turkey, especially religious education?
There's a problem there as well. God is calling. I don't know what we did before these telephones were ever invented. How did we communicate? There's a problem there because of, related with the same question, because secularist believers in Turkey, they are not very happy with religious people taking part in the government. They are saying if you are a graduate of theology, you should be a theologian, not a governor. So they are telling people what they can be and what they should be, which I don't think is what they should decide. And they're making it difficult for the graduates of the School of Divinity to take positions in other subjects. They're giving them less credit because they're coming from a different department. They're making their entry into the university more difficult. This is one of the basic struggles we have in the country, along with the headscarf issue as being one of them. And so the education basically is, the first 8 years is compulsory, and 3 years in high school is not. 90% is government schools. The other 10% is basically private schooling. And every year we have about 1.5 million Turkish high school graduates trying to take the exam to be a university candidate. And only 300,000 of them can succeed, because that's all the space we have in the country. So that means 1.2 million high school graduates every year cannot go to the university. Now about 50,000 of those go to foreign countries because their parents can afford to do that. And the others, they have to look for a job. This is a major problem in Turkey. Turkey is a young nation. About 69% of my country is under the age of 29. That means every 7 out of 10 people They need schools, they need teachers, they need jobs when they graduate. And definitely, we don't need all this rhetoric, what you're talking about. We need actually schools and teachers and jobs. In 10 years, Europe will need Turkey more because the age in Europe is increasing and the workforce is decreasing. So we may see a different Europe in 10 years as well. Well, Father Tom?
Thank you very much.
Please come to the front for your Turkish delights.
You can come to the front for Turkish delights, as well as, I guess, take a look at some of this literature. In the back, however, is also muffins and pumpkin bread and banana bread. And please don't bring any into the church, though, because we want to try to keep the carpet in good shape. Friday evening, can I just have a kind of a show of hands? How many feel that you might be planning to come on Friday evening? Okay, that's good to know. We're going to have it in the auditorium, and there will be refreshments also, and there will be coffee and decaf and hot water service. So it'll be a little bit more gracious, and I think, well, Aiden is always gracious, but it'll be a little bit more informal. We may not have the seats, just in rows. We may try to gather around and be a little more informal, maybe with a little more time for question answer. Thank you all. Thank you, Aiden, very much.
And
so much appreciated.
Father Tom, this is the Tolerance in the Ottoman Empire from the Faculty of Divinity in Istanbul. So this is a very close friend of mine, the author. For you as a promise.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Turkish delights and American delights.